Aesop Fables 21-25 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents: 21. The wolf in sheep's clothing. 22. The eagle and the beetle. 23. The mother and the wolf. 24. The hare and the tortoise. 25. The dog and his reflection. 21. The wolf in sheep's clothing. Once there lived a wolf. He could not get enough to eat because of the watchfulness of the shepherds. But one night he found a sheepskin that had been cast aside and forgotten. The next day, dressed in the skin, the wolf strolled into the pasture with the sheep. Soon a little lamb was following him about and was quickly led away to slaughter. That evening the wolf entered the fold with the flock. But it happened that the shepherd took a fancy for mutton broth that very evening, and picking up a knife, went to the fold. There the first he laid hands on and killed was the wolf. The evildoer often comes to harm through his own deceit. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing version 2. It was a bright morning, and near a sheep farm, a wolf roamed. The wolf wanted to eat the sheep, but couldn't, as the shepherd and their dogs were watching the flocks too closely. That very night the wolf found some sheepskin that had been sheared from a sheep, cast away and forgotten. The wolf came up with a cunning plan. The next day the wolf then wore the sheepskin and blended itself into the herd of sheep with the other sheep, unaware that a wolf was amongst them. When the shepherd's mind was somewhere else, the wolf quickly took the chance and ate the poor sheep. He rejoiced at his win and continued to stay with the flock with the idea of picking another one to eat. That evening the wolf entered the fold with the flock still blending in perfectly with them, but it just so happens that the shepherds fancied a mutton broth that day. The shepherd went out and picked the first sheep that he could find, which happened to be the wolf disguised in sheepskin. Thus the wolf that the shepherd mistook for a sheep had been killed and eaten by them. Shepherd's mum said, "David, the broth tastes a bit different today." "Add some more spices, Mum," said David. Moral of the story. The moral of the story is that the evildoer often comes to harm through his own deceit. This means that a person who does evil gets harm in return through their own method. 22. The eagle and the beetle. A beetle once begged the eagle to spare a hare which had run to her for protection. But the eagle pounced upon her prey, the sweep of her great wings tumbling the beetle a dozen feet away. Furious at the disrespect shown her, the beetle flew to the eagle's nest and rolled out the eggs. Not one did she spare. The eagle's grief and anger knew no bounds, but who had done the cruel deed she did not know. Next year the eagle built her nest far up on a mountain crag, but the beetle found it and again destroyed the eggs. In despair, the eagle now implored great Jupiter to let her place her eggs in his lap. There none would dare harm them. But the beetle buzzed about Jupiter's head and made him rise to drive her away, and the eggs rolled from his lap. Now the beetle told the reason for her action, and Jupiter had to acknowledge the justice of her cause. And they say that ever after, while the eagle's eggs lie in the nest in spring, the beetle still sleeps in the ground. For so Jupiter commanded. Even the weakest may find means to avenge a wrong. The Eagle and the Beetle version 2. Once there lived an eagle. One day she was hunting a hare. The hare, lacking anyone who could render him assistance, saw a beetle, the one thing which chance offered him, and so began to supplicate him. The beetle encouraged him, and, seeing the eagle coming near, enjoined him not to carry off his suppliant. The eagle, scorning the smallness of the beetle, devoured the hare in front of him. The beetle, remembering the evil done by the eagle, kept watch over his nest, and if the eagle ever gave birth, the beetle rolled them along and dropped them, until the eagle, driven away at every turn, finally fled to Zeus, for the eagle is the sacred bird of Zeus, and asked him to give him a safe place for birthing his young. Zeus offered the eagle a space within his robe for giving birth. The beetle saw this, rolled up a globule of dung, went up to Zeus, and dropped the ball into the folds of Zeus's robe. Zeus, wanting to shake the dung out, stood up and did not realize that he hurled away the eggs. For this reason it is said that eagles do not hatch during beetle season. This story teaches us not to scorn anyone, realizing that no one is so powerless that they cannot avenge themselves when treated foully. 23. The Mother and the Wolf. Early one morning, a hungry wolf was prowling around a cottage at the edge of a village when he heard a child crying in the house. Then he heard the mother's voice say, "Hush, child, hush, stop your crying, or I will give you to the wolf." Surprised but delighted at the prospect of so delicious a meal, the wolf settled down under an open window, expecting every moment to have the child handed out to him. But though the little one continued to fret, the wolf waited all day in vain. Then, toward nightfall, he heard the mother's voice again as she sat down near the window to sing and rock her baby to sleep. "There, child, there, the wolf shall not get you. No, no, Daddy is watching, and Daddy will kill him if he should come near." Just then the father came within sight of the home, and the wolf was barely able to save himself from the dogs by a clever bit of running. Do not believe everything you hear. The Mother and the Wolf version 2. Once a nurse who was endeavoring to quiet a bawling child, among other attempts, threatened to throw it out of doors to the wolf if it did not stop crying. A wolf, who chanced to be prowling near the door just at that time, heard the expression, and believing the woman to be in earnest, waited a long while about the house in expectation of seeing her words to be true. But at last the child, wearied with its own importunities, fell asleep, and the poor wolf was forced to return back to the woods empty and without supper. The fox, meeting him and surprised to see him going home so thin and disconsolate, asked him what the matter was and how he came to speed no better that night. "Ah, do not ask me," says he. "I was so silly as to believe what the nurse said and have been disappointed." 24. The Hare and the Tortoise. A hare was making fun of the tortoise one day for being so slow. "Do you ever get anywhere?" he asked with a mocking laugh. "Yes," replied the tortoise, "and I get there sooner than you think. I'll run you a race and prove it." The hare was much amused at the idea of running a race with the tortoise, but for the fun of the thing he agreed. So the fox, who had consented to act as judge, marked the distance and started the runners off. The hare was soon far out of sight, and to make the tortoise feel very deeply how ridiculous it was for him to try a race with a hare, he lay down beside the course to take a nap until the tortoise should catch up. The tortoise meanwhile kept going slowly but steadily, and after a time passed the place where the hare was sleeping. But the hare slept on very peacefully, and when at last he did wake up, the tortoise was near the goal. The hare now ran his swiftest, but he could not overtake the tortoise in time. The race is not always to the swift. The Hare and the Tortoise version 2. The hare, one day, laughing at the tortoise for his slowness and general unwieldiness, was challenged by the latter to run a race. The hare, looking on the whole affair as a great joke, consented, and the fox was selected to act as umpire and hold the stakes. The rivals started, and the hare of course soon left the tortoise far behind. Having reached midway to the goal, she began to play about, nibble the young herbage, and amuse herself in many ways. The day being warm, she even thought she would take a little nap in a shady spot, as if the tortoise should pass her while she slept, she could easily overtake him again before he reached the end. The tortoise meanwhile plodded on, unwavering and unresting, straight towards the goal. The hare, having overslept herself, started up from her nap and was surprised to find that the tortoise was nowhere in sight. Off she went at full speed, but on reaching the winning post, found that the tortoise was already there, waiting for her rival. 25. The Dog and His Reflection. A dog, to whom the butcher had thrown a bone, was hurrying home with his prize as fast as he could go. As he crossed a narrow footbridge, he happened to look down and saw himself reflected in the quiet water, as if in a mirror. But the greedy dog thought he saw a real dog carrying a bone much bigger than his own. If he had stopped to think, he would have known better. But instead of thinking, he dropped his bone and sprang at the dog in the river, only to find himself swimming for dear life to reach the shore. At last he managed to scramble out, and as he stood sadly thinking about the good bone he had lost, he realized what a stupid dog he had been. It is very foolish to be greedy. The Dog and His Reflection version 2. A dog was carrying a piece of meat in his mouth to eat it in peace at home. On his way he had to cross a bridge across a brook. As he crossed, he looked down and saw his own reflection in the water. Thinking it was another dog with another piece of meat, he made up his mind to have that also. So he made a snap at the shadow in the water, but as he opened his mouth, the piece of meat fell out, dropped into the water and was lost.